based on the fact that these drapes are untied, because Patsy wouldn't have done that. Why would the criminal go over here and just randomly untie one drape? Like, what was he there for? Why would the criminal go out of their way to cross over here and mess with this window? And that's the kind of stuff John Ramsey is trying to make us believe. And John is trying to make the case that, you know, Patsy would have tied these up, maybe trying to insinuate that, you know, somebody came through this window. Okay, y'all know how we do it. Big shout out to Catherine, or KMRQ12, for the sweet donation and sponsoring this next video. Catherine, really appreciate you. Hope you enjoy the next video. Much love. If you see Catherine in the comments, say what's up. Big hug to you, Catherine. Thank you so much. Let's get it. Okay, once again, huge shout out to Catherine and everybody else showing love in the chat and whatnot. You know, appreciate you so much, Catherine, for the donation. Didn't have to do it, man. And I'm always just amazed at the support that you guys give. So thank you so much. Thank you for listening and whatnot. So if you remember, we talked a little bit about, we were talking about Charlie Brennan and his, you know, his analysis of the case, you know, at the barristers, I think it was, their International Society of Barristers and whatnot. And it's a pretty good article. You know, I just kind of went through, gave a long version of the Cliff Notes, or I gave you my version of Cliff Notes with the explanation. So I wanted to dive a little bit more, and there were some things that I didn't touch on because I knew I was going to talk about him here. So I wanted to dive a little bit more into Bill McReynolds. Now, Bill McReynolds is a family friend, or was a family friend, of the Ramseys. And so we want to kind of get a better understanding of him. Why was he a suspect? And so on and so forth. So let's dive in right now. One of the first questions that I asked when I got all these resources together, and kind of the resources that I'm using, well, honestly, pulling from like several sources, like the 97 interview for John, 97 interview for Patsy, 98 interview for John. I think, and we got both 98 interviews for John and Patsy. I think the search warrants, just to kind of make sure we got the search warrants in there, got the autopsy report of JonBenet in there, got the books for that, you know, John wrote, or John and Patsy wrote together, and then the book that John wrote, and then the forensic files, so we can kind of get a better understanding of everything, and then some other depositions, and then the 2000 interviews and whatnot, so we can just kind of pull from these sources when we're trying to understand a little bit more about Bill McReynolds. So that's everything that we have. And so the first question that we want to query of these sources is sort of like the introduction, because Bill McReynolds was known as Santa Bill, and, you know, several people said, well, hey, you know, don't we have an explanation for the bear? Well, not necessarily if John and Patsy have anything to say about it. And so we'll kind of unravel that here some more. And obviously you'll see some very John and Patsy-esque things come up. And so the first thing is the introduction of the Santa bear. And so the item described as Santa bear was relevant enough to the investigation that Patsy Ramsey was shown this photograph in June of '98. So this is the first time she was introduced to this Santa bear. And so if we want to kind of pull on that resource and understand more about it, again, this is Notebook LM. They were just kind of asking her, hey, you know, the Boulder police wanted assistance in identifying and perhaps retrieving Santa bear. And they're asking Patsy, do you recall that? And she said, yes. And they ask, and I think this is Levin asking, I think, and this is in the 2000 August transcripts. And so sort of asking, what's your understanding that the bear was sought, that the bear that was sought was the same bear that you were shown in photographs in '98, June. or was it your understanding that the bear that we were looking for was the same bear that you were shown photographs of in June, like 2 years ago? Patsy says yes. Okay, so the same bear that you were unable to identify. Patsy says yes. Question comes and says, we collectively, the prosecution team, received from either Mr. Morgan or Mr. Haddon the bear. The bear is that your understanding? She says yes. So the question comes, how did we get it? I mean, what was your participation in the chain of events that led to the recovery of that bear? Because the question is warranted because this is the bear that was on JonBenet's bed. And they were saying they didn't know how it got there. The bear was in a closed crime scene. So essentially what we're talking about is this bear was on JonBenet's bed right here. Over here. That's what I'm suggesting. Kind of see some of the characteristics kind of laid up right here. And there's a doll right here and stuff like that. So the bear that we're talking about is right here. And they asked John and Patsy about this and they said, I don't know how that got there. And so what the detective is asking is, you know, this bear that exists right here, how did y'all get it? That's what we need to understand. This is a closed crime scene. You guys don't know, you know, whatever. How did y'all get the bear? My only understanding of how they got the bear is maybe the Colorado home was packed up. And after all the investigation went down, this is 2 years later, maybe after investigation went down, they said, hey, you know, you're free to have the house back. We got everything we need. And so that was one of the things that didn't come out, and it was packed up. And then anyways, you know, it was in some boxes that came back. So that's my understanding. So anyways, Patsy was unable to identify this bear initially. I think in 98, she said, I don't know what that is. I can't even tell you. And so later the prosecution team receives the bear from either Mr. Morgan or Mr. Haddon, who represented the Ramseys. Patsy confirmed her understanding that the bear was received, was the the same one shown in the 98 photographs, but she didn't though. So it goes on to say that Patsy, but she was, I don't understand this, because it seems like they're saying, hey, can we get your assistance on something? And they're asking about, we said, hey, 2 years ago, we saw this bear. Okay. We were asking you about this bear. You know what bear we're talking about. It seems like Patsy is like saying yes. Okay. Now that you know, are you in possession of that bear? And it seems like Patsy is saying yes. But then Lynn Wood gets involved at some point in time. Leads to the discovery of the bear. How'd you find it? Oh, Gene Matthews, this retired police officer, he was going into some boxes. I directed him on which boxes he needs to look at, and he went through the boxes and you know, did you assist him? No, I didn't assist him. I just told him where to look, so on and so forth. And that was in our basement, or that was in my dad's basement of his house. You know, we were still in the midst of what she say? She said a remodeling. They were in the throes, were her words, of a remodel. And so she told this guy that was apparently doing this out of the kindness of his heart. You know, he was a former officer who I guess had done some sort of security for them or something like that. And so it was at, you know, her dad's house. So she said, you should look over here. So he goes on to say, you know, Patsy, you emphatically denied in June of 98 knowledge of the bear. Did you change your are you changing your recollection following the interviews in 98 as to whether or not you had prior knowledge of the bear? And so obviously this is where Lynn Wood is going to come in. He says, do you know what he's asking you? And so Patsy says, do I recognize the bear? Is that what he's asking me, essentially? And Lynn says, the emphatic part is the only thing that concerns me. I'm not denying that it was emphatic, but I think the point is you denied it in June of 98. And the question I think he's asking you is, when you found it, Did that jog your recollection that you might remember the bear? Is that what you're asking? And Bruce comes back in and says, that's not quite the question, but it's pretty close. He restates it himself and says, what I'm asking you is, in June of 98, you stated I did not recognize the bear. Patsy says, correct. And so the question comes in from Bruce again. He says, you recall that you went on to the cry was, so as we talked about the last episode, the cry went out for help. The prosecutor's office put out a bolo, got so many tips, got so many calls and stuff like that on the bear and stuff like that. So the cry went out for help locating the origin of the bear. Did you at some point between the request for assistance in June of 98 have the opportunity to rethink the origin of the bear and realize that that was in fact, JonBenet's Santa bear? So Lynn steps in again, says, I think you meant between your request and December of 98. Bruce steps back in and says between June of 98 and our request for help in December of 98. So basically, at what point in time did you recognize that, hey, I think I do actually, I said at first I don't recognize the bear, but I do actually recognize the bear is what's being asked right here. But the problem comes in as we continue to talk is that Patsy actually doesn't recognize the bear. She actually gets a little hazy. Patsy identified a photograph, specifically photo 118 and 119, as showing a little white bear dressed in a Santa Claus outfit. So this is the 98 interview I think that she was kind of talking about. So let me see if I can skip down. Blah, blah, blah. Was there a light associated? No. You've seen that shot before. Patsy trying to figure out the blanket, blah, blah, blah. Patrick Burke, so that's her lawyer that's there. Trip DeMuth is there. I think he's for the prosecution. So for a second, Trip says, would you like a look at Christmas? What does that look like to you? And Patsy says, a little white bear dressed in Santa Claus outfit. Tom Haney says, now, Patsy says, I believe that was a gift bag. That's the gift bag we were talking about before. Was there anything in that? Do we know? Tom says, yeah. Later we have a bigger blow up. So when we get to that, I will show you that. And so I guess we're talking about the bear at this point. They're getting her in 98, just kind of getting her to recognize the bear. John Ramsey's point about it. I think in 98, John Ramsey, when shown photo 5, pointed out a little Santa Claus doll located in the bed next to JonBenet's, of course, as we just saw. He said stated he'd never seen it before and found it strange. He suggested asking Patsy if she knew what it was. Now, John's done that several times. Just ask Patsy. The problem is, this is not a big deal. This is not really a big deal if it's on JonBenet's bed, because again, as we talked about when we talked about the pineapple, that wouldn't be if you just acknowledged, we know that Patsy loved Christmas. You guys had a Christmas tree in every single room. If you just simply acknowledge, hey, yeah, JonBenet loves, because they acknowledged it before, JonBenet loves, in these interviews, JonBenet loves stuffed animals. What's the issue? There is no issue. Just acknowledge that, hey, yeah, I remember that bear. But one of the things that I'm consistently amazed by, and as you see photo number 5, one of the things I'm consistently amazed by is the fact that John and Patsy don't know things, like basic things that you should know. Like if your son or your daughter won something, I would hope that you don't forget everything, especially if we're talking about somebody that meant the most to you. We're talking about somebody that meant the world to you. It's like they don't remember anything that happened that night. They don't remember anything pertaining to JonBenet. It's all a bunch of I don't knows. And that's so weird because it's just like, it's just a bear. You know what I mean? But what I wonder is that, you know, some of these theories that you put forth, I don't know where they come from. I don't know where you get them, but it had to be some sort of strategy room tactic that it comes from for you guys to sit down and just like lay out every single individual and why somebody could be associated with the crime. Everybody except yourself. So John says, yeah, I've never seen it before. And this was in his 98 interview where he, you know, had the pleasure of speaking with Lou Smith, and photo number 4, a little tie back and drapes, blah, blah. What does it look like? Patsy would have tied it back up, blah, blah. And so it's just like, even stuff like this. Patsy would have, if we're asking about drapes, some of this stuff doesn't even need to be said. Do you see in photo number 4 that this little tie back for the drapes, you know, they have to be blah, blah, whatever. Can't tell. See what it does compared to the other side. It looks untied. And I'm sure if it was untied, Patsy would have tied it back up. You know, maybe. And I guess, you know, this is the drapes he's talking about or something like that. They're not tied up. Where maybe, I guess on this other side, the drapes were tied up. And John is trying to make the case that, you know, Patsy would have tied these up, maybe trying to insinuate that, you know, somebody came through this window. But again, you know, when we talk about deflections and just shooting in the dark, that's exactly what we mean, because this is this is definitely a deflection and shooting in the dark. When the pattern has to be consistent. Did they come through the basement or not? That's my thing. We can't flip flop and say, okay, they may have come through this window in JonBenet's room. And we can insinuate that somebody may have come through the window in JonBenet's room based on the fact that these drapes are untied, because Patsy wouldn't have done that. Why would the criminal go over here and just randomly untie one drape? Like, what was he there for? What was he doing? And that's what I'm saying. Like, what, John, come on, man. Like, what are these criminals there for? Are they there for a kidnapping or not? They're not there to just walk through your house and just, oh, it's a nice house, man. I like what they did with the place. These drapes specifically, they look, I wonder where they got these drapes from. Yeah, man. You know, I've always been jealous of John, and I see why I've been jealous of John now, because this bedding, these decorations, my God, I have to say, Patsy did her thing. Come on. Like, who is this criminal? Just taking a tour of the house, going in John Andrews' room and picking up some, you know, John Andrews has a really nice bed. You know what? I need that rope over there. But anyways, yeah, this is a nice bed. Didn't go in Burke's room. Didn't need anything in there. Never even touched that. Nobody went in Burke's room. Nobody touched that. Smart enough. This person was smart enough. And to this point, we're believing that Bill McReynolds walked up these stairs as a 67-year-old man or in his 60s after heart surgery several months ago. And John and Patsy both acknowledging that he needed help going up the stairs. And so this man, who probably would have been huffing and puffing after going up one flight of stairs, you know, he's taking his time walking around the house. I'm not going to jump ahead. Nonsense like this. So they go on to say, okay, do you remember 5, seeing that before 6? Did JonBenet have 7 hair ties in her hair? Blah, blah, blah. So on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. Goes on to say, Patsy know about a little Santa Claus doll? And John says, I have to get better glasses. Patsy, if Patsy knows that little Santa Claus doll is strange. I've never seen it before either. Lou Smith says, and that Santa Claus doll is located where? John says in the bed next to JonBenet's. Lou Smith says, where's that? John Ramsey says this one. So they point to photo number 5. I've never seen it. I've never seen that. Some of these trophies kind of, in fact, there is one in there lying down next to it on the floor, a little unusual. I think she kept better care of those than that. And so what John is doing, as you may know, is John is essentially insinuating that this is a setup. John is setting, and that's what I'm saying. There's a mastermind to this. John is setting you up to believe anything, but you have to stop and say something about this is inconsistent. This would have, so John is insinuating, I don't know where this came from. A criminal put it there as a sign. This is untied. Patsy would have tied that back up. It's unusual. He is not telling you straight out that you should believe him. He's trying to make you take a leap and jump there for him so he can say, you said it, not me. This is untied. Patsy would have tied that. Maybe the criminal came through there. How, John? You said they came through the basement. Please, we got to stop jumping all over the moon. Where did the person come from? You said the window down. What was this person doing? You said the window downstairs was cracked 1/8 of an inch. Can't even see how it's barely open. But somehow, some way, the window was all the way open by the time we saw it in crime scene photos, even though it started off cracked 1/8 of an inch. And we're talking about Bill McReynolds. Lou Smith, at 5'9", I would say Lou was probably about 180 pounds. And he was more on the slender side. Lou Smith could barely get through that window. I think Bill McReynolds was bigger than Lou Smith. And at that age, after heart surgery, Bill ain't going down no window, and Bill ain't going up no window. Even if we consider Janet, even if we consider Chris Wolf, Bill ain't going down there. So what is Bill there for? Bill is only there for because Bill would be the only one JonBenet trusts. But that's hard because Bill can't get in and out of the house with ease. Bill is moving. Like, I understand that we're talking about the killer move slow, but Bill is moving too slow. And all of this extracurricular stuff is nonsense. Why would anybody go over there and mess with this stuff and just untie it? Why would Bill would probably, if Bill came and got JonBenet and said, come on, and they go downstairs, that's that. Who would have, if you go, you can just cross the room and go set the bear right here and walk out and be like, criminal tag set, now they know who did it. Now they have an idea. We're going to play with their heads a little bit. Now we have an idea. That's set. Why would the criminal have to come over here and mess with this? If they came through down through the basement, why would the criminal go out of their way? See, this is just stupid stuff. And that's what I'm saying. This is dumb stuff. Why would the criminal go out of their way to cross over here and mess with this window? And that's the kind of stuff John Ramsey is trying to make us believe. So anyways, John says it's strange. He's trying to set the stage for us. Okay. Point number 2. So we introduction of Santa Bear. We don't know how it got there, but it's here. Don't know where it came from, but it's here. Somehow it ended up in Patsy's hands. Point number 2. The introduction of Bill McReynolds. Where did Bill McReynolds come to begin with? How close is Bill McReynolds? Because my question was he at that Christmas party? That's what I wanted to know. Was he at the Christmas party at Fleet White's? I know he did the Christmas party that John and Patsy told him to do, but I was wondering, was he at the Christmas party at the Whites? And I don't think he was. I think an article I read said he was with his family somewhere on the night of Christmas and stuff like that. So Bill McReynolds was the individual who played Santa Claus at the Ramseys family Christmas party for the kids. So Lou is, in the 98 interview, Lou is kind of talking to John, answering all his questions, whatever, so on and so forth. A little bit later, now the Christmas party. Goes down here, says, now the Christmas party. Okay. Now the Christmas party for the kids on the 23rd. Now, if you could just in your own words recall, and Lou asks this a lot, recall what you remember about the first. John says, well, yeah, we had this Christmas party usually a day or two before Christmas, primarily for our family, friends, children. And we invite Santa Claus to come, and we have presents for all the kids, and Santa would give them out hors d'oeuvres, and we'd start early and usually end early. And this year we decided, or that year of 96, we decided, well, we weren't going to do that because it was a lot of effort, and Patsy just had her 40th birthday party. And we were kind of partied out. Patsy's birthday is on the 29th. Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe I think they threw the party. I think he's saying that they threw the party early. Okay. But anyways, he says we're kind of partied out. Even that's a weird thing to say, because you went to a party, you had a party on the 23rd, and then you went to a party again on the 25th. So you weren't too partied out. You had a party for hitting 1 billion. You weren't too partied out. And that's what I'm saying. All of a sudden, we weren't really in it's this whole, we really weren't in the spirit of anything. Just things just came at us, and we didn't really want to do them, but we did them anyway. Bull crap, man. Like, you just attended a party. Why are you acting like somebody pulled your teeth and made you do something? Anyways, we were kind of partied out. We had a big birthday party for Patsy. And so Lou says, when was her birthday? He says, well, we did it. It was a surprise party. It was early December. He says her birthday is not until the 29th of December, but we had a big surprise birthday party in early December. So we kind of decided not to do the Christmas party. I think we were going to ask a friend or two over, and the Santa Claus, which normally came, called us and said she got Charles Kuralt here doing a documentary on me, and he's been kind of following me around, and I'd like him to come to your house, for, the Christmas party, because I think it's a nice one, and it's one of my favorites. And Patsy kind of threw together a Christmas party really quickly because she thought that would be fun. She enjoys that kind of thing. And so we invited the regular crowd that always came, and we put together a Christmas party. And so essentially what John is saying is that, we weren't going to do the Christmas party. We're partied out, but somebody came and says, hey, here's an opportunity to show off your beautiful house. We think you throw the best Christmas parties. Why don't you, we think that you're going to do it again. I got a guy coming and doing a documentary for the Christmas party. And then John and Patsy were like, oh, we weren't going to do it, but I guess we will. So we just strung something together really quick, called everybody over. Santa Claus came, passed out gifts, and it was a standard party that we had every year. Kids decorated. I think they decorated gingerbread houses. That night, Patsy went down, bought a bunch of these pre-made gingerbread houses, and got big buckets of frosting, and the kids were in the kitchen decorating them. Now, of course, when you go into some of the pictures with the pineapple, and you see the wide table, you'll see the gingerbread houses on the table. Some of the I think there's like 1 or 2 gingerbread houses on the table. You'll see that when you go, type in pineapple, JonBenet pineapple, and you get the wide view of the, I guess that's the, I don't know what it is. Anyways, but, whatever. But you get the wide angle, and you'll kind of see gingerbread houses on the table. But anyways. So, we got gingerbread houses. Patsy went down and bought a bunch of these pre-made gingerbread houses, got big buckets of frosting, and the kids were in the kitchen decorating them. One thing is I always wondered was whether it was really Charles Kuralt. So Lou says, who is the person that said that? And John says, Bill McReynolds. So Bill, this is Bill's fault. Bill did this. He came with this idea. And Lou says, I got some pictures and these were taken. There's no numbers on these pictures. And they were taken, I believe, right around Christmas party. And they came out of the camera that was in the house. And you can kind of look at them, point them out. John says, I can do that. Unfortunately, you tend to suspect everyone when something like this happens. Lou says, what I'd like you to do, John, is kind of look at these photographs and tell me who's in it. And if you can remember when this was and taken by who. John says, yeah, well, of course, that's, myself and John Fernie. I don't know what he's got in his hands here. Must have been some kind of bag. Lou says, okay, is that one where he's also holding a scarf? John goes on to say, blah, 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 blah. We get down, I believe, to in which case, so Patsy gave them all scarves. That might have been the scarf she gave him, blah, blah, blah. Santa passed out the gifts. Would have been one of the gifts Santa passed out. She had Santa Claus usually read something to the kids. That's probably what's going on here. Well, the camera is pointing to the picture of Santa Claus, kind of in a pensive mood, and Miss Claus is right behind them. John says, yeah. And Lou says, Lou says, we're going to go to the Santa Claus a little bit later. All kinds of Santa Clauses, because there was other Santa Clauses involved in these different parties. In fact, there's even Santa Claus. Have you heard this in the past? So it goes talking about the Santa Claus. So Bill McReynolds plays Santa Claus for a couple of years, and JonBenet becomes very fond of Santa Claus. And I think, and this is the 98 interview, JonBenet, Bill McReynolds, who played Santa Claus, and this is Patsy talking, who played Santa Claus, was very fond of JonBenet. He was, from our house, he'd taken them by the hand and take them to go get something to eat, and he just adored her. That would be the only thing I would think of. The year prior, he came to our house for Christmas, not in Santa Claus regalia, just in street clothes, and he had a gingerbread house. And I looked at him and I'm going, what surprise? And he said, Santa Claus is Brett or Bill. He told the kids, and he said, my son made this gingerbread house. His son was a baker at a cake place down the street in the shopping center, made the gingerbread houses. And he said, I have this gingerbread house, and I thought since you were all into Christmas, I would bring it to you. And he told JonBenet and Burke that he was Santa Claus's brother, and that he looked like Santa Claus except in his jeans or whatever. And so he said, I'm Santa Claus's brother, and I heard his reindeer for him, blah, 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 in the summers. And so Patsy goes on to say, and how long after Christmas did he show up? And I guess he did this before, Christmas, and said, how long after Christmas did he show up as Santa Claus's brother? Patsy said a couple days later. Okay. Did JonBenet have any expectations that, he would show up after Christmas? And Patsy said, no, I don't think so. Okay. And she goes on to say, let me see if it's here. She goes on to call him essentially, and I'll let me pull it up. She goes on to call him essentially weird. Okay, I actually think it was John who was going crazy on Bill, calling him weird and stuff like that, and calling him a odd duck and stuff like that. I think Patsy was just surprised. So anyways, Bill was noted as being very fond of JonBenet, adored JonBenet. I think he had some glitter from JonBenet that he was, carrying around and stuff like that. So number 3, kind of linking Bill McReynolds possibly to the crime. Like, where does he come in? And so Lou Smith indicated that they would be discussing various Santa Clauses because there were others involved in different parties. And there were even indications that JonBenet may have had a secret Santa Claus, like we just kind of went through. John Ramsey recounted hearing via his investigators, who heard it from Patsy via JonBenet's friend parent, like we talked about before, Megan Bosniak, and then Barbara Bosniak, something to that effect. A little tidbit that her mother said that JonBenet said Santa was going to come visit her on the evening of the 26th. And John noted that JonBenet never told them this, suggesting that it could have been secretly prearranged. And so kind of, again, setting the stage for this Bill McReynolds thing, Bill to show up and kind of waltz in as the only Santa they know, even though Lou is saying, hey, we've seen these different Santas in various contexts. Are you sure it's Bill? And so John is saying, yes, I believe it's going to be Bill. And so John believed that if Santa Claus, specifically Bill McReynolds, as the Santa that JonBenet knew, was someone she knew and trusted, and she was expecting him, and she would have gone downstairs with him wherever he wanted. And so this allowed John to segue back into the pineapple. Lou Smith had asked him about the pineapple, and I told y'all John lost it. John didn't want to answer nothing. It probably was 10-15 minutes, I would assume, 10-15 minutes, maybe more, of John just essentially just talking in circles, not talking about nothing. Like I said, John went to the mood and Mac. John was like, oh yeah, it could. Are you sure it's pineapple? It could be cereal. No, John, it's not cereal. It's pineapple. Please answer the question. I just don't know. I don't know. So anyways, this gave John the perfect, bailed him out. This gave John the perfect segue into sort of going into blaming. And it kind of sucks because Bill has no clue that this is how John feels about him. Like, Bill has no clue that he's being hated on to this degree. And it's just, Bill's like, man, I don't want no problems, man. I just want to show love. And the Ramseys are giving out energy that people are not aware of until like it smacks them in the face. And it just really breaks their heart, what they're experiencing. And so John gets a nice little segue into the pineapple. He said could be plausible, and this could explain the presence of the pineapple in JonBenet's system, as she would have screamed if she ate it from anybody else. But since she got it from somebody she trusted, i.e. Santa Claus, then she's not going to scream. So Bill would have been a good person to walk up. He'd be good for the job, because if we sort of hypothesize that Bill came down through the window and knew it was broken, is what we have to assume. Knew it was broken because he's jealous of John and he's watching. So he kind of slides down through a window that he probably can't fit through. And so he goes down there through the window when everybody's gone, and he sits and he waits, and then goes and gets JonBenet when JonBenet goes to sleep. JonBenet, even though she's knocked out like a light, like we said, she's out like a light, like we said on the last analysis, she's wide awake when, Santa Bill comes through. And so John mentioned that John Douglas describes the killer as someone known to the family who had been in the house and was angry or jealous. And John felt that Bill McReynolds fit this description, stating that he was somebody we knew, somebody who was in the house and possibly very jealous of people with assets. We don't have any, and when I tell you we don't have any evidence that Bill was ever jealous of John, jealous of John's money. We don't even know how much Bill was making. Bill retired. Bill never, from anything that we know, Bill never complained about anything that we know of in terms of money. All we know is that Bill was fond of JonBenet. He loved JonBenet, and we know that Bill loved kids. You know what I mean? But so John Douglas says, hey, I think I'm drawing a sketch, and I think Bill McReynolds fits, and John was all too happy to kind of, go with that. The crazy thing, though, is that John starts hurling like this crazy stuff. We don't even know if Bill is guilty. You understand me? We don't even know if Bill is guilty. But here we have John saying that John's investigators reportedly received information from Jim Hudson, a friend. I think Jim Hudson was the president and CEO before John at Access Graphics. And I was wondering where he went, because the next year, all of a sudden, Jim was gone. And then John was the new sheriff in town. But anyways, we see Jim pop back up on the scene, and they receive information from Jim, whose brother worked with, what's the word I want to use? Whose brother worked with adults who are fond of young children in an inappropriate way. So he's working, it's the P word if you want me to be clear. So Jim Hudson, as a friend, his brother works with these type of individuals, allegedly identified McReynolds from his description. And so if we read into that, and this is coming from the 98 interview, had some stuff over there. I think it's closer to the bottom. John Douglas drew it, blah, blah, blah. It might be up here somewhere, because what's up here I'm going to get to. But down a little lower, talking about him being feeble, why would he act certain ways, stuff like that. Kind of being disrespectful to Bill is really what he was being. John Douglas drew it. Somebody we knew, somebody who was in the house, somebody that would have been jealous of people with assets. I think it's not a bad thing. I never said a harsh word to him, but he would have been very jealous. Apparently didn't have two nickels to rub together. Whoa. Saying Bill was broke. Bill was so broke. Now John is messy. Bill was so broke, he didn't have two nickels to rub together. Bruh, that's something to say about somebody like you've never said a harsh word to him. He's never said a harsh word to you. For all you know, he bought your kids. This is a man that we're talking about. This man bought your kids just because he was thinking of them. His brother has a bakery down the street. He went to his brother's bakery, said, "Hey, I was thinking about your kids." Not just for JonBenet, but for Burke. He said, "Man, I was thinking about your kids, and I thought I'd, you guys are into Christmas. I thought I'd bring them a gingerbread, house, or gingerbread cookies, because you guys are into stuff." John says, "I never said anything wrong to him, but I think he was so broke, and he was jealous of me because I had money. He ain't got no money, and so he's so broke he can't even put two nickels together." And it's like, you don't know what he has. He's a professor. Maybe he had a good retirement. Maybe he wasn't out here just spending crazy money, but he had a little bit of money. And so, like, these are statements or comments coming from John that are unwarranted. Like, nobody asked for this rude behavior. And so, or these rude comments. And so he would have been jealous. He didn't have two nickels to rub together. So he and JonBenet had a kind of special little bond. She worshipped him as Santa Claus. And apparently, from what I understand, the guy is a person who abuses children. If he's not a person who abuses children, he's a frequent visitor of adult video shops. And that's what I have highlighted here. He's of adult video shops. And Lou Smith says, "Have you investigated that?" John says, "We've gotten information to that effect." "Are you sure?" Lou Smith says. "Absolutely couldn't have." John says, "Absolutely. We have some letters from him. We have tape from him that hopefully you guys have. If you guys don't have it, I could listen to it. But was a tribute to JonBenet or something like that. And apparently it starts up and it says, you left Santa Claus and went, doing all those fancy things, and you came back to Santa Claus our guy said it was very weird. So essentially he's saying that um, uh, uh, Bill McReynolds sent this sort of tape to JonBenet, and he kind of in similar fashion, what we're calling, Gary Oliver's ode to JonBenet. JonBenet, you're the prettiest, you're the best, blah, 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 blah. I can't believe, blah, 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 blah. It's kind of like now the same thing is being attributed to Bill McReynolds, because we have to set Bill McReynolds in a place to where he's this nasty guy who is this nasty old creepy guy who is preying on my daughter, even though you don't have any evidence, but he's this nasty old guy who's preying on my daughter. I think my investigators have evidence of him abusing children. And if he's not that person, then we saw him going into adult shops. Man, you don't know that man's business. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's not a problem for his wife, and this is what I'm saying. This is the stuff that John does, knowing that John had an affair on his wife, and that's how he lost his first marriage. John is under fire from a young lady by the name of Kim Ballard. Now, they went trying to find Kim Ballard, and Kim Ballard didn't want to come to the door. She didn't want to talk. When police went to investigate what she was saying about John, I believe, she didn't want to come to the door and talk. That's shady. Like, you can't get on Fox News and television and be like, yeah, and me and John had something going on, but then want to run in the house and not want to say nothing or interview or whatever. There, obviously some people feel like, that maybe she felt intimidated. There are people in powerful positions, so she didn't want to come out and play. I understand that. But I'm just saying, you said something about him. If you can get some witness protection or whatever, then that'd probably be the way to go. Or speak in confidence so that nobody knows that, you guys talked, and they can kind of protect you, get you on the record and stuff like that. Essentially, if you feel like you're in danger or whatnot. Or I guess don't talk at all if you're that scared. But essentially, you're running around calling people out of their name and questioning people's integrity. You know what I mean? Questioning people's integrity who have done nothing wrong to you. They've been nothing but good to you. But you are like a ravenous wolf on these people. You are just dying to eat them alive. And these are people who have done nothing to you. And all of a sudden, you're calling them child abusers and questioning their morality over, bruh. Okay. Anyways, our guy basically followed him and said it was very weird. He wrote me a letter saying that he carved JonBenet's name in a heart. It had the name of 3 other little girls that died early. I mean, I couldn't start saying, okay, that's the guy, but that was premature. That would be in my mind. Explain how if we said JonBenet ate pineapples between 9 and whenever, when she went to bed, and when we found her, that's the only way that's plausible to me that she could have eaten, is someone who knew and trusted and said, let's go downstairs. There's a surprise. He might have sat there with pineapple and a glass of tea. I don't know. Those are things that have to be answered. And so Lou says those are things that have to be answered. John says, yeah. So say it could be like last night. I thought about it all night. And so anyways, they're finished questioning. And so Bill McReynolds is this crazy child abuser, apparently in John's eyes. And his integrity is questioned. And so based on the fact that, we don't know if he's a child abuser, but it's essentially based on the fact that he's going into adult film stores. Now we gotta, check him for JonBenet. And John goes on to mention that McReynolds' behavior at the memorial service was also noted by John's friend Jim Hudson and as potentially suspicious, where he it goes on to say that up here, which I kind of skipped over really quickly. McReynolds, I guess, in the beginning of the service, he was suspicious, and he came to the memorial service, and a good friend of mine who was there said that you guys need to go back and look at that video, because when Patsy went up to hug him, he pushed her away. And this was Jim Hudson is the fellow's name that said this. He said, my brothers, I don't know. He's been in Orange County working with, child abusers. So essentially, there's this memorial for JonBenet Ramsey. I'm not sure when it is. I'm not sure if this is the memorial that Susan Stein was talking about. She set up for the Ramseys, and Fleet White had already set one up, but they were like, you know what, we're not going to be a part of the one Fleet White did. We're going to be a part of this one. I don't know if it was that one, and I can't remember the time frame on that one. But anyways, Bill McReynolds comes to the memorial and apparently doesn't want to hug Patsy. We don't know if by this time Bill McReynolds has been disrespected by the Ramseys, and he's like, you know what, I'm absolutely done. I'm absolutely finished with talking to them for whatever. Because as we know, with this kind of talk, I think Bill actually went to Spain after he got so much heat about this being named by John and Patsy. He went to Spain, and the cops told him he had to come back. And so he came back and did whatever they needed him to do, and he went back out of town. He went back to Spain. And I think eventually he kind of settled in New England. And so he just went to some other places trying to get away, because he was a little frustrated. And like Janet was saying, his wife was saying, he was never the same. He really loved kids. But after that, he kind of just, swore off kids and just kind of let them alone. He had grandkids of his own. But anyways, John is kind of saying, yeah, man, he did some weird stuff. He was writing some letters to my daughter and blah, blah, blah. And so just kind of tearing him down. John found McReynolds' appearance on the Today Show shortly after the murder is as Santa Claus from Boulder strange, especially coupled with his subsequent departure for Europe, questioning if he was as frail as he seemed. So essentially, John was saying, oh, you're so frail, you're so feeble. And, that's what he was saying in the transcript. He was so feeble, didn't seem feeble to me, so maybe he did this because he doesn't seem feeble enough. Well, you saw him show up with Janet. He was feeble enough to show up with Janet. And John was essentially questioning whether it was real or not. So just essentially trying to target Bill as very weird. And it's just like, okay, John. Fourth thing is what Patsy Ramsey said about Bill McReynolds and the bear. Patsy's shown these photographs, couldn't identify it at the time. She confirmed that, the prosecution later received the bear she believed was one of the photos that was represented to her. But she called it, she ended up calling it like a little angel bear. She never admitted that it was the Santa bear. Detective Harmer, who I believe was on the case from the beginning, and she was listed in the police files. She was listed in the police updates. Chief Beckner got to the point to where he said, we want to list everybody's experiences. We're getting all this hate about, we don't know what we're doing. We don't have any experiences in this. So Chief Beckner just kind of listed everybody's experience as a cop. And Detective Harmer was saying, hey, we've talked to somebody who actually was at the Little Miss Christmas pageant, and there was a video that they gave us, and they said that on the video, or Detective Harmer was talking about, she saw the video had a table of prizes in which that bear, the Santa Claus bear, was on the table, in which JonBenet won the bear. Patsy would not fess up to knowing anything about that bear. She said, nah, I understand that there's a little white angel bear that doesn't look like it's a Christmas bear with the Santa Claus stuff, but kind of has like a banner on it or a ribbon or something like that. But it ain't, but I'm not so sure it's that bear. And so essentially they come to the point to where they kind of ask Patsy, okay, what do you feel like in terms of, are you comfortable? Do you know now that you said that in 98, do you know now which bear it is? And she ends up saying, no, I don't know. So Where Bill McReynolds comes in on this, I don't know. And you kind of obviously, as you see Detective Harmer kind of mentioning some of this information and whatnot. But where Bill McReynolds comes in on this, I don't know. Just because Bill McReynolds is simply tied into this, just because at this point, he was Santa Claus. No proof, no rhyme or reason. He's just Santa Claus. He did some stuff that, you know, we're having to believe that he did some stuff, according to John. Wrote some cards, letters, or emails or videotapes or whatever. And because he's a little weird, you know, and because he carries a vial around of glitter from JonBenet, he's weird. Now, I have to admit, if he's doing some of this stuff that John is saying that he's doing in terms of carrying some of this a glitter vial around and saying that he wants to be buried with it, and whatnot, you know, that's a little weird. That's a little concerning, especially like writing letters to JonBenet. I don't know what kind of guy this was. You know what I mean? So I can't really say it was super weird. I can just say I'm not used to seeing that kind of behavior, personally, to this extent. You know, to each his own. I don't know the guy. He's passed away now. I didn't know the guy, but to each his own. I have nothing to do with that. So John Ramsey goes on, as we said, John Ramsey goes on to essentially just absolutely degrade Bill McReynolds and try to connect them and say, essentially what John's point is that, you know, Bill McReynolds should be absolutely connected to this thing because he's Santa Claus. I'm trying to understand. What I really wanted to understand was, did anybody else say anything about Bill McReynolds in relation to the bear, or in terms of being a suspect? The furthest I got was nobody really ever mentioned Bill McReynolds, but Bill McReynolds did, as we know, give hair and blood samples. The crazy thing, though, about the hair and blood samples is that the search warrant mentions, well, I'll get to that. Let's just, why wasn't Bill released as a suspect? Sources don't explicitly state that he was officially released, even though I think that Brennan reported that he was released based on just the fact that, you know, his heart condition. He couldn't have done this. They collected his stuff, you know, his hair and blood as evidence. Obviously, the allegations came in. Search warrants mentioned that the perpetrator likely had personal knowledge of the home and a schedule, and given the lack of forced entry, characteristics align well toward McReynolds. I will say this: in the forensics, though, the forensics collect his blood. I think his blood is AB type. They collect his blood. However, he is, because of his blood, a non-secretor. And I think AB types do that. I think AB types, from what I understand, they're non-secretors. And what that means is their blood, or the contents, I think I have it here, because I was a little confused. Well, I won't say confused, but I just want to know a little bit more about it. But a non-secretor refers to an individual who does not secrete their blood type antigens AB or AB, A, B, or AB in their bodily fluids, such as saliva, mucus, and tears. Essentially, they don't express their blood type outside of their bloodstream. Approximately 20% of the population are non-secretors. So, you know, their blood doesn't show up in bodily fluids such as saliva, mucus, and tears. And this was Bill McReynolds. And so it's kind of like, if saliva were to be found on JonBenet, like I believe there was some, it would be hard, as I understand it, with his blood type to identify it, because his blood type doesn't show up wouldn't show up in his saliva or his tears or his mucus. So could it have been Bill? Yeah. We can't prove that it wasn't. Well, also too, Burke's secretor status was non-conclusive, and so is JonBenet. I think he was the only one. I think everybody was secretor or established as a secretor or non-secretor, but Burke and JonBenet were the only two that were established as inconclusive. Obviously, JonBenet was dead, so some of that stuff, doesn't come through because she's dead. But when I was looking for Burke, I was like, well, why wouldn't Burke is alive and well. Why wouldn't his secretor status be able to be determined? And they were saying stuff like, sometimes, somebody drinks too much water and it just kind of messes up the system and the system can't find it. Or somebody is dirty, or you just can't find it or whatever for some reason, but it's like some shady stuff that they do to where it can't be found, that you should be able to find it, but like little tips and tricks to stop you from being able to find it, essentially, is what I understand it as. Now, Bill is receiving all of this heat because some of these things that tie him to or seem to tie him to JonBenet. But one of I think the biggest things that they're coming after him for is, like we said, with the Brennan analysis that we saw, because of his wife. So JonBenet McReynolds, born in Bluffton, Arkansas, I believe, July 19 of 33, PhD in English, minor in theater from the University of Minnesota. I Have a Great Desire, author of the novel I Have a Great Desire, screenplay, commencement, and she got a grant from the creative writing, I think, for some of her plays. So some of the plays that she wrote, like 4 plays. First one is like Fight Like Hell Till You Get to Heaven, Hey Ruby, and that's the one in question, The Man Who Knew John Dillinger, and then Mother Night. Kind of give a little bit of a synopsis here, and this is online. Fight Like Hell Till You Get to Heaven. Story of Mother Jones, the militant labor agitator. Play uses the occasion of Mother Jones's 100th birthday to recapitulate her tumultuous career. It is panoramic in scope, using incidents from major labor conflicts from the 1880s through the 1920s, is what that's about. Goes on to the second one, which is Hey Ruby. This play was suggested by a crime which occurred in the 60s. A young girl was tortured over a period of months and finally murdered by a woman with whom she was boarded, and the woman's 2 daughters. The play starts with a courtroom scene, and the story is told in flashbacks. The focal point of the play is the close identity the woman feels with her victim. She keeps insisting, "I am the one who was murdered." A carnival atmosphere adds a bizarre element. The man who knew John Dillinger, Jimmy McIntosh, is a man in the 70s, a victim of amnesia. He believes that he is the last surviving member of the Dillinger gang and has been looking for Johnny for the past 40 years. He falls into the clutches of a practical nurse, Rosie Freeman, who first befriends him, then betrays him to the police in a replay of The Woman in Red, Rosie's patient. Esther and the 2 children from upstairs contribute their own poignant stories to the theme of lost identities. And then the last play she has that doesn't have a description is Mother Night. And so Hey Ruby is the play in question. And so it's talking about Sylvia Likens. And so in July of 65, Lester and Betty Likens The real story: Lester and Betty Likens are traveling fair concessionaires left Lester and Betty, traveling fair concessionaires, left their two children, Sylvia Marie, who's 16, and Jenny Faye, 15, as boarders in the home of Gertrude Banzniewski, alias Gertrude Wright, 37, a divorced mother of 7. On October 26th of 65, police called to the East New York street house, discovered Sylvia's battered body. And this is Gertrude. And this is Richard Hobbs. He was involved. Likens was lying on a soiled mattress on the floor of an empty upstairs bedroom. Her body was covered with cuts, severe bruises, and a variety of open sores, some from over 100 cigarette burns, peeling scald marks, and missing skin. Ooh. She had 2 black eyes, shredded lips, and fingernails broken backward. Dang. Further, Likens' body showed evidence of malnutrition. We just dropped her off. A 3 was branded on her chest, and the words "I am a P," basically a street worker for women, or I guess for men too. Could be for both. But anyways, they branded her chest, and the words "I am a street," adult worker, and proud of it, were etched into her stomach. The official cause of death was a subdural hematoma from a blow to the temple, but shock and extensive injuries contributed to her death. Jenny Likens approached the investigating officers and offered to make a statement, provided she was immediately removed from the home. Over the next several days, police took the entire Banzniewski family and 8 neighborhood children into custody. Anna Cisco, 13, Michael Monroe, 11, Randy Lepper, 11, and Judy Duke, 12, were charged with injury to a person. All would later be released under subpoena as state witnesses. Banzniewski's youngest children, Marie, 11, Shirley, 10, James, 8, and Dennis Wright Jr., were placed in separate foster homes. In December of 1965, a grand jury indicted Gertrude, her daughters Paula, 17, and Stephanie, 15, and her son John Jr., 12, and 2 neighbors, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, both 15, on charges of first-degree murder. The highly publicized April 1966 murder trial drew national attention. The testimony revealed that Gertrude had supervised and assisted her own and other neighborhood children in the daily torture of Likens. Sylvia Likens spent the last weeks of her life shut in the basement of the house without access to food or water. Neighbors who were aware of Likens' condition in the Banzniewski household had not interfered. Gertrude pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. She was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The judgment was reversed on appeal in 1970, and a new trial was ordered with a change of venue. The 1971 retrial again found her guilty of first-degree murder. In 1985, she was granted parole, despite a public petition protest that raised over 40,000 signatures. She died in Iowa from lung cancer on June 16th of 1990. Aged 60. Okay. And so this is kind of, I guess, the corner home, where she lived and where Sylvia was tortured. And so she was apparently down in the basement. Stephanie Banzniewski, who voluntarily testified for the state, was granted a separate trial, found not guilty and released. Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs and John Jr. were all convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 2 to 21 years. They served 18 months and were released on parole in 1967. Coy died on June 23rd of 2007 from a heart attack. Richard Hobbs died of lung cancer on January 2nd, 1972 at the age of 21. Dang, lung cancer at 21. John Jr. lived in relative obscurity under the alias John Blake. He became a lay minister, frequently hosting counseling sessions for children of divorced parents. He died of diabetes in May 19 of 2005 at the age of 52. In 2007, An American Crime, a movie based on the Likens murder, debuted at the Sundance Film Festival. That same year, Stars Home Entertainment released The Girl Next Door, adapted from the 1989 horror novel of that name by Jack Ketchum, which is loosely based on the notorious murder. And so this is the motivation for why Janet wrote her play, Hey Ruby. There are some connections that we see between JonBenet being in the basement and having marks on her and stuff like that. Obviously, Bill and Janet's daughter was kidnapped. So there's an element there 22 years before JonBenet. So there's an element there. But I kind of feel like that's kind of on its own. It just seems like Janet is into that stuff. I mean, that's theater. People write crazy stuff like that, and sometimes, like I said before, this stuff is a release for some people. And so this kind of goes into, Bill, dying and kind of where he was when he died, or kind of his feelings when he died. So man who played Santa Claus at Ramsey's house dies. A man labeled by John and Patsy Ramsey as possible suspect in their daughter's slaying has died. Bill McReynolds, who had been hired to play Santa Claus at the Ramseys' home, was found dead of a heart attack Monday at his home in Mashpee, Massachusetts. His wife said he was 72. Police sources, and this is crazy, man, because this is not long after the whole JonBenet debacle. He said, with this stuff weighing on his conscience for, 4 or 5 years, essentially not too far after, I guess, what was he, 67? Was he 67, I think, when this happened? But man, to die at 72, let's say he is 67, 4 or 5 years, like 5 years, after this, that's not long at all. He didn't have a long retirement. Dang, bro. He was 72. Police sources say they never considered the former University of Colorado journalism professor as a serious suspect. McReynolds was investigated because he played Santa Claus at the Ramsey home for 3 years in a row. His last appearance came 2 days before JonBenet was found slain in 1996. JonBenet's death also resembled the plot of a play his wife had written before the slaying. Authorities collected hair and handwriting samples from the couple in the first few months following the killing. The Ramseys called the McReynolds a suspect in their book, Death of Innocence. Janet McReynolds said Wednesday that her husband's involvement in the infamous case scarred him and forced the couple to move to a small town in Cape Cod after more than 30 years in Colorado. He was just so devastated by the mere idea anyone would suspect him of a crime, she said. McReynolds' big heart made him a popular instructor at CU, said fellow Professor Doug Cosper. Some of his students kept relationships with him their entire lives, he said. McReynolds' fascination with Santa Claus began after his retirement from the university in 1992, according to his wife. He loved being Santa, he loved little children, and then the Ramsey case destroyed that career and just devastated him. Janet McReynolds said he loved that little girl. It was a very sad thing in his life, because he genuinely loved children, and it was the happiest part of his life. When the couple moved to Massachusetts in 1998, the grandfather of 6 filled his time helping the elderly at the local senior center. A memorial service was scheduled for Friday in Massachusetts. A service in Boulder will take place later this month, and his ashes will be scattered in one of his favorite Colorado mountain getaways, his wife said. And so I'm going to close on that, but it's crazy because you have a man who the Ramseys destroyed. They destroyed him. It's this older guy who, like, man, I just like kids. I love kids. I love because he's a professor, so he's a teacher, so he probably likes to see how their minds work. And when you become a grandparent, you just love your kids. If you're a parent in general, like you see other kids and and you're like, oh man, he's so cute, or she's so cute, I love that baby, blah blah blah. Every now and again, and if you're just a decent human being, you see kids, you know, you love the sight of kids. You know, some people are more drawn to kids than others. Some people, you know, they just see the kid, you know, they pet the kid on the head, they pat, give him a little pat on the, hey junior, you know, how are you, whatever, and they go on about their business. But some people have suckers or candy, and they get down there with them, and they just know how to talk to them, you know, and that's their thing. They love doing that. Just, it's no different than people who are dog people or people who are cat people. You know, if I see a dog, I'm probably going to be like hi and bye and just keep walking, you know. But some people see a dog and they just go into full dog love. And I'm like, do you know that person? Do you know that? No, I just like dogs. That's what they do. Some people just like kids. Now, in this climate and in climates before, that can be, the way you go about loving kids can be a little bit weird. I'm with you on that one. But if somebody's not trying to do weird stuff, to try to run them in the ground and just talk about them and just degrade them with no motivation, that shows a very dark side to John Ramsey and Patsy Ramsey. And like we said, it's, you know, we're going beyond just throwing people under the bus at this point. At this point, like, we're trying to ruin people's lives. And at this point, we don't care, because the question was coming up for me: do you care about putting the wrong person in jail? And it's almost like I don't think you do. I don't think you do care if you put the wrong person in jail. I truly believe that you don't. That is concerning. But that's I wanted to do a little bit more of a deep dive. That's everything. I'm not going to belabor the point. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you once again, Catherine, for the love and the monetary gift. Thank you for everybody who continues to contribute to the channel. Likes, shares, subscribes, monetary value, or what have you, and just continuing to engage on this topic. So thank you so much. Remember to continue to take care of yourself, respect others, you know, respect yourself. Until next time, take it easy.